Good morning, everyone. It'll just be a few moments and we'll get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Welcome to the 27th installment of my weekly virtual office hours address. People continue to talk to me and say they really appreciate these addresses and hearing from their mayor. So I will continue to do these through, the current shelter in place and even longer. These Facebook Live events, are a great way for me to give you updates on a weekly basis, answer some of your questions, and of course provide some words of encouragement. Definitely, This has been an area of fatigue for a lot of people. My wife and I call it pandemic brain, as far as the stress of how the world has changed has really affected a lot of people, and whether or not it's that lack of social interaction or just simple depression. I'm hoping that everybody's trying to take care of yourself. So thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale during these extraordinary times. Stay safe, stay healthy. If you have needs, definitely feel to reach out to me. I can either try to put you in contact with someone else, or see if I can help you myself. You know, Taking care of yourself physically and mentally is critical, especially during these times. So, and keep following the county health order. Uh, People need to do your part to stop the spread of the virus. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, reduce the number of people that you're coming into contact with, and maintain safe social distancing when you're out. And of course, as always, wear your mask. It's mandatory. It helps protect you and protect others. As I've said before, if you need a mask, if you need a face covering, please contact me. They're still required, and it's actually very, very important that you have several, so that when you come home from when you're out, you can always wash one and have one ready. We're definitely not out of the woods yet. You could be a carrier of the virus, or someone you could meet could be a carrier of the virus and be asymptomatic, not showing any symptoms. So it's important that you protect yourself as much as possible. We're now 186 days after the March 16th public health order that started the shelter in place, and really was a big attempt to stop the spread of COVID-19. And since that declaration, a lot has happened. A lot happens every day, it seems like. I'm on daily press conferences or seminars that I need to watch. I'm on conference calls to confer and advocate on your behalf. Let's go ahead and start talking about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last week or so. So last Tuesday, Governor Newsom held his press conference and announced that 5 states had moved from purple to red tier. 5 counties had moved within the state from the purple to the red tier, and one of those counties, of course, was Santa Clara County. So that allowed reopening of certain indoor operations, which was really important. People could finally go to their barbershops and hair salons and nail salons indoors. And I think that was an important kind of first step. So for those operations, it was going back to the county health order that we had back at the beginning of July, middle of July, that it went in place, and then there was a lockdown from the state. So I've been happy to hear from lots of residents that have actually been able to get their hair cut, get their nails done. I think it's a big step forward, and as long as we keep staying in the red zone and hopefully moving on into, if you remember, the 4 tiers: purple, red, orange, and yellow. Hopefully we can move into the orange tier sometime soon. But being able to move into that red tier is a big step. It also allowed museums, zoos, aquariums to open to 25% capacity. Gyms and fitness centers are now allowed to open to a 10% capacity. Several of them have started, and they've also been doing outdoor fitness. So we're trying to take advantage of the good weather while we can. Shopping malls are also allowed to open up to 50% capacity. So some of the larger shopping malls in the area have also opened up. But indoor gatherings are still prohibited from a county standpoint. And so no movie theaters, no indoor dining. Definitely, I've been working with the county on, and we're having discussions on what that actually means from it's especially from a restaurant standpoint. From a restaurant standpoint, with the current state order, We could open up to 10% indoor dining, but from a county order, and we always go with the most, cities always have to go with the most restrictive order. The county currently does not allow indoor dining. And so, I've been talking to a lot of restaurant owners, and they're, waiting impatiently to get people indoors, mainly from the fact that they're worried about the weather. We had our first rains this week. Thank goodness it actually helped clean up the air. So for those of you that have been outside, seeing blue skies for the last day or so after our rains, I was happy to finally get some of that good weather, and I think that helped clean out some of the bad air that we've had from all the fires for the last 2 weeks. So uh, that's been good, but the restaurant owners are definitely worried about what happens when it starts raining. It starts getting colder and windier outdoors, and there will always be some people that sit outside for my coffee shop hours, and there are always people, no matter what the weather happens to be. There are always people that actually happen to be are fine with sitting outside. So hopefully we'll get some movement on that. I had some discussions with the county supervisors and county health department this weekend. For the last, I don't know, about 20 weeks, we've been having weekly Saturday calls with the mayors and the county board of supervisors and county health and different people within the county to talk about how we move forward, what the issues are on a given week, and what we can do to best serve our community, whether or not that's the residents, the business, and make sure that people are being as safe as possible, and how we move forward as far as opening things up as quickly as possible. On Monday, from a city standpoint, several playgrounds were opened. And so I talked about this last week, and have been pushing the county for several weeks. They'd had conflicting directions on the county website that basically said that the cities needed to clean down all playground equipment between every use. And that was an impossibility from a staffing standpoint. It just wasn't realistic. And so the county health department looked at it and finally changed what their directions were about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. But basically said that signage was needed, that kids need to sanitize before and after using the playground, and that parents need to socially distance while they're there. So we got the signs the end of last week. We've tried 4 parks: Lakewood, Brayley, Las Palmas, and Ortega parks. I've heard generally positive feedback. There's been a few bad incidents, and we're following up on that. But there's signage that's up there now that please, that people need to do safe social distancing. They need to be able to they need to wear their face mask. Children should sanitize their hands before and after using that playground equipment. And so that was an important kind of first step. There's been only a few cities, there people said, oh, it's all over the county. And in talking to the city managers of several other cities, they've kept their playgrounds closed also. So hopefully, especially with the distance learning that all the kids are going through, they do need a place to get outside, not just backyards, but out and get some exercise. And playgrounds are a good way to do that. If things go well, hopefully we'll be opening up more playgrounds in the next week or so. So for all those parents out there, hope that moves forward as quickly as possible. And then on Monday at a state level, and actually a state and federal level, Governor Newsom and President Trump had a press conference. So the president came in and met with Governor Newsom, and the tone was a little bit conflicting, of course. Newsom had dropped his a little bit fiery tone, but still pressed Trump on Monday to acknowledge that climate change is making the wildfires worse across the West Coast. Wildfire experts, of course, agree that more controlled burns and selective logging could actually help control some of the future wildfires. And so there was some conflict there. There were some words from President Trump, but I think the biggest thing is they did meet, they did collaborate to figure out how we get appropriate support for those communities that have been hit by fires. How do we get appropriate federal FEMA support, to come in and help with the recovery? Those are critical things. We've done a lot of mutual aid and been able to get, aid from outside of the state and even outside of the United States to come in and actually help with the wildfire. So that's actually been very good. From a city standpoint, on Tuesday, City Council met, and we kicked off the meeting with several special orders of the day. One of those was Hispanic Heritage Month, and so September 15th to October 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month, and it was great that I put the invitation out to Ron Gonzalez. So Ron Gonzalez, many of you might remember, but was Sunnyvale's first Hispanic mayor, and actually San Jose's first Hispanic mayor. And he's actually president, CEO of the Hispanic Heritage Association of Silicon Valley. And so, he came and gave a few words, but it was good to kind of go back to some normalcy as far as our council meetings are concerned, where we could bring in people to kind of take the special order of the day and say a few words. So it was good from that standpoint to honor him and all the valuable input that our Latinx community gives, whether or not that's frontline workers, from healthcare workers, everyone in our community. So it was good to actually celebrate some of the niceties and going back to what we've done in the past when we had live meetings where people could show up and receive a certificate and say a few words. And from a council standpoint, we did several big decisions, one of which was the Fair Oaks Park renovation. And so that was approving the final bid. So this has been a long going process. So we have from a city standpoint, we have a plan to renovate all of our parks over the next 15 years or so. But the Fair Oaks Park was the next one in line. We've done outreach. We did outreach last year to get what people wanted from a park. And so that design went out, and it was a lot of effort to figure out the ever-changing needs of the community, and then also kind of what the final design of the building should be, what additional features like a dog park would be added, or what basketball courts should look like, being cricket friendly, as well as soccer and football friendly. And then of course the biggest thing that was approved as part of that decision was a Magical Bridge playground. So we just talked about playgrounds. The Magical Bridge playground was an all-access playground, and it was first put in place in Palo Alto. And when a Girl Scout came to us several years ago and said, I would really like to see this in Sunnyvale, council listened and put that as part of the plan. There's a whole nonprofit that's raised funds, and the city helped supplement those funds, but this was that big first step forward for that Magical Bridge playground. So the constructions should start before the end of the year and take 12 to 14 months. So hopefully by the end of 2021, we will be doing the actual grand opening of that park, and the renovations, the Magical Bridge playground, and all the other amenities. So I'm looking forward to seeing that groundbreaking happen, and then just starting to move forward with all the new changes. And the other thing that council did was adopt a resolution for basically to enter a loan agreement with the U.S. State Environmental Protection Agency for a loan of up to $221 million, and then authorize the city manager to execute that loan agreement and all the related documents, with closing costs and such. But this was a big win for us because, for what we're doing at the wastewater treatment plant, and that's you know uh, almost basically a 15-year project at this point. And we're close to finishing phase one of multiple phases that this project is allowing us to do. But it's improving that 60-year-old wastewater treatment plant, and that's really important to make sure that we have the appropriate capacity. That it was getting harder and harder to do repairs, and so it's upgrading that. And also all that while maintaining operation of the wastewater treatment, and that's the critical thing. So you can, it's a puzzle of effort where you build, one thing on the site, and which is duplicating something that's already operating. Build the first step, and then after it's operational, then you tear down what that was duplicating, and then build a different portion. So it's been an ongoing effort. It is a big logistical plan, program managed. From that standpoint, it's actually great to see this moving forward with those loans. And especially right now, we were able to get those loans at very, very good rates. Is important for kind of the long-term viability of the project, and making sure that it's paid back over many, many years. So that was very positive. And normally those loans are harder to get, but the city, Sunnyvale, is a very well-run city. We're very fiscally conscious. We have a 10-year balanced budget and a 20-year plan, and that's the important thing from my standpoint. Is it's really critical from what we're doing to make sure that we do whatever we can to save our taxpayers' money, and from that standpoint, do provide the appropriate infrastructure that's needed. So that was a big step. And then on Wednesday, Wednesday morning, there was a virtual press conference. So I joined the Board of Supervisors President Cindy Chavez, one of our supervisors, Joe Samidian, and 10 other mayors from across the county, as the Santa Clara County Health Department revised the order calling on the large healthcare providers to increase their COVID-19 testing. And that was a big step. There had been something that had been put in place on June 14th that basically told them, okay, you need to provide COVID-19 testing to anyone that's covered under your healthcare system, whether or not they're symptomatic, whether or not they're asymptomatic. It's critical for opening up the people, especially frontline workers, get tested if they need it. And so if they feel that they've been exposed, if they are going, if they need to go on a trip, they need to get tested as quickly as possible and get those results back as quickly as possible. And I've been hearing stories for months now that healthcare, people go to healthcare systems, and it's either they're jumping through hoops of multiple phone calls, or just, blatantly denied coverage or of getting a test unless they're symptomatic. And so this is the problem, that in order for us to be able to go through recovery and making sure that if people feel that they've been exposed, they can get tested quickly, so that if they become positive, then they get those results back, and we can trace the other people that they've come in contact with. It doesn't help if people are, for one thing, don't get their tests for a week or two, and then how many people they've exposed in that week or two becomes the question. But I've heard too many cases. I've heard of people working at Kaiser, and Kaiser covers about 30 to 35% of the people in the county, and they've only done about 10% of the COVID-19 testing. And so the county has actually stepped up in a big way, and I appreciate their efforts. It's been a lot of cajoling initially to, and that was one of the things. The mayors came together in April and said, we need to partner on this, and the county responded. The county has been very positive about hearing us, hearing our concerns, And it allowed also the county supervisors to work with the county health department to do testing throughout the county. And the county has done, a vast majority, a very large percentage of all the testing that's been going on. And so what this new basically what this new ordinance will do is conceivably have fines up to $5,000 for every violation for the healthcare providers when they're turning away essential workers. And so, much like we had some churches that said we don't care, we're going to start doing indoor services and not care about social distancing, not care about wearing masks, and there were fines for those. Now we're trying to make sure that, Kaiser Permanente, HCA Healthcare, Sutter Palo Alto Medical Foundation, and other private hospitals within the county are now, required to do testing for people that need it, or conceivably face fines. And it was, there's been a lot of discussions behind the scenes to try to get that going, to try to get them to come into compliance and do the appropriate testing. That hasn't worked, and so the county has ultimately decided that fines are the next step. If the carrot doesn't work, ultimately it's the stick, and hopefully this changes things. There are definitely some healthcare providers that have been very good about working with us and working with the county, and so from that standpoint, it's making sure that we have appropriate places for everyone to get tested. And then this morning, the POWMIA flag was raised at City Hall. So today is actually POWMIA Remembrance Day. And this was one of the special orders of the day that we announced on Tuesday evening. But today is the day where Americans can remember our service members and civilians who never returned from war, whether or not they were captured and finally made it back, or whether or not they were never returned. And so this is making sure that they're not forgotten. So if you get a chance today, pause for a moment and give thanks to those that were able to return, or just never returned. And it affects the families, but most importantly, it's just to make sure that thought that they are not forgotten. And so my father was in the service, and he had friends that never came back, and that did affect him. That it was very, very difficult. That it's bringing hopefully everyone makes it back, and it's difficult for those that serve, and those especially for their families that don't know what happened to their loved ones. So anyway, thank you. If you get a chance today, we raised the flag at City Hall this morning. Go ahead and you'll see the POWMIA flag at City Hall today. And let's go ahead and get to some announcements for upcoming events. And from my standpoint, I can't believe it's already been 1 year since our last State of the City. So I don't know how many of you went to last year's event. It was a big celebration, and the mayor gets to put his thumbprint on that. It was celebrating all of our different service organizations, whether or not it's the Rotary, the Elks Club, the Moose organization, or all the different other organizations, Leadership Sunnyvale, Sunnyvale Community Services, all the different organizations, our CERT team, all the different organizations that make a difference in our city, and giving them a platform to talk. It was also, about art and getting more people involved. And so, there were murals, and 5 muralists came in and spent the day doing murals celebrating Sunnyvale. You can actually see those murals on downtown historic Murphy Avenue. So if you get a chance this weekend, those are out. And Tuesday nights for the next few weeks, there's kind of a pop-up interactive mural event. So young and old can have a chance. So show up on Tuesday. I think it starts around 5 p.m. and Tuesday evenings and goes until I think like 7:30. But there, and I actually took part for a few minutes this week. There's an interactive mural that people can come by and do some drawing, do some sketching. So it's actually trying to be more than just highlighting other people's art, but taking part in art yourself. So it was a year ago that we did this. The my mayor as mayor, State of the City, and tomorrow is our next Celebrate Sunnyvale State of the City event. And so at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and this year we've gone all virtual. At 10 a.m. you can see the State of the City address, so my State of the City, and it's actually from this standpoint, virtual does add a little bit more to what can be done. So we can get photos of different things in our community, and I think that's going to be a positive addition. That it's not just speeches in the mayor's speech; it'll also be a series of photos from around our city of events that have happened, and then at 10:30 is the community awards, and so that is our yearly event where we honor different members in our community that have made a difference. But it would have been nice to have some of that in person, but because of COVID-19 we couldn't do that. But award nominations for the community awards are accepted throughout the year, and then a panel of former community award winners end up deciding on this year's winners. And then of course there's a special Mayor's Award of Excellence. By tradition, that award is not announced until the day of the event. So at 10:30 a.m. you'll see the series of award winners, and then the mayor's award of excellence. So for the distinguished resident of the year, it was Greg and Christy Bodbiach, and so they're the co-founders of esports, inclusive sports program. They've been active in our community for many years. Educator of the year was Jesus Ramirez, and he's the family and community liaison at Fremont High School. A high school student of the year was Perry Plantenberg, and she's from Homestead High School. Business of the year was Sunnyvale Community Services, and of course that was well deserved. This is Sunnyvale Community Services 50th year in operation, and what a auspicious 50th year it's been. They're currently in works as far as moving to larger facilities in a bigger location. But of course, in the middle of all that, COVID-19 happened, and they've had to really step up their operation in order to provide services, whether or not that's rent or utilities, or most importantly food, to hundreds of people on a weekly basis that have been hit and affected by COVID-19. Our contributions to the arts is going to Jan Knight, and then environmental achievement is going to Crystal Wickham, who's been so active as far as from our sustainability commission, as well as active in so many events in making sure that we get a greener Sunnyvale. And so I appreciate all the winners. For the Mayor's Award of Excellence, you'll have to wait until tomorrow to hear who those two award winners will be. And the mayor does have the option of choosing either an individual or a group or both. And I really thought that this year being let's say an extraordinary year, I've seen several groups and several individuals step up, and it was really difficult to choose. But we are, I did decide that it would be best to honor both an individual and a group for what they've done for Sunnyvale, especially over the last year, and especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. So get a chance. It'll be online on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, starting at 10 a.m. and then at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. So get a chance, watch that. It'll also be, you can go back and watch it whenever you want if you're busy during the day or any time over the next week. It'll be up there for everyone to see, and hopefully people enjoy that. And I think the virtual component adds something that conceivably a lot more get to see and hear what's going on from within the city rather than just the certain number of people that either are there at the event, which usually 100 or 200 people, or the people that actually watch it on the local access channel. And actually, as far as tomorrow is concerned, it is election season, so I'll be at the farmers market. You can drop by for a yard sign or a campaign button, or talk to the mayor about whatever you want. It's, it'll be all safe, socially distanced. If you need a mask, definitely drop by. I have masks to give away if you need them. Let's see, and then other upcoming events. Mary Avenue Overcrossing. There's an outreach meeting scheduled for Thursday, September 24th from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And it's by video. It's a teleconference. And it's, the city has been studying for many years now for about a Mary overpass over 101 and 237 going into Moffett Park. That was part of the plan from a city standpoint for many years, going back to the 1970s. There are currently 5 proposed alternatives that are being considered, and it's different, from no plan at all to the concept of only bikes and only bikes and peds, bikes and shuttle buses, bikes and actual cars. So there's a lot of different options there, and then conceivably making sure that that's flexible for future other alternative transportation. So that meeting will be Thursday the 24th, so about a week from now, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And then, of course, the next Unity event, so the next Unity listening event is a public safety roundtable discussion, and that will be a roundtable discussion with our Chief of Public Safety, Fan No, and his command staff, and it will be moderated by, a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert, Eugene Whitlock. And so that will also be overlapping a little bit. That'll start that same Thursday, September 24th, starting at 5:30 p.m. and that goes to 7:30 p.m. So hopefully you can take part. Go to sunnyvale.ca.gov/unity to sign up. That will allow you to register, and that will also allow you to keep up to date on what's going on with those events. Keep you up to date, and also allow you to how you ask questions either during the event or prior to the event, and that's an important part of that process. This is the 5th of a series of events, and from my standpoint, that was critical in response to what happened with the murder of George Floyd, and making sure that people, with the rally of 2,000 people at City Hall, I was happy to take part in that, and from that standpoint, it was a pledge to interact and engage the community, to talk about what their feelings are, and then hearing back a report to that and figuring out what changes need to be done. And lots of changes have already been done from a city standpoint. We removed the carotid hold, which was our last hold that we had. We published 10 years of officer involved shootings. We've we've released information about complaints against officers. So we've been add a lot more transparency to what's there. And then a report actually will be coming back to council later in October as far as what the findings were over the last 5 different events, and we will continue to listen and figuring out how to make sure we keep our community engaged. Has been a big effort of mine. Listening, and that commitment to listening to our community was one of my commitments 4 years ago when I started, from a council standpoint, and it was, when I was sworn in and had my first office hours, 4 years ago this week, it was that commitment to make sure that I'm engaging the community, hearing their concerns, hearing, how to figure out ways for them to either solve their problems, get more engaged. You know, a lot of people from those Friday morning office hours have moved on to commissions, our boards and commissions, which I think is great, or started, ideas like our pet parade that happened last year, and that's the important step as far as this is concerned, is listening to people, getting them engaged, and trying to create additional platforms to talk to our community is a critical thing. And then the other thing that's coming up is on Tuesday, October 13th at 7 p.m. at City Council, we'll be reviewing the housing study. And the housing study was kicked off several years ago, and it was to look at, the types of housing that we have in our community, what additional protections we might need, as well as, what we can do to help out residents in different ways. And so there are like 9, and more than that actually, when you look at 9 suggested changes and additions and things that can be done, and then there are additional items. And so please, if you get a chance, go through the draft housing study that went to the Housing and Human Services Commission, and we're trying to get more feedback about what people would like to see and what needs to be done to make sure that Sunnyvale is more livable at the end of the day. Okay, let's go ahead and get to our county dashboard standpoint. From a county standpoint, there are now almost 20,000 COVID-19 test cases that have happened. So we're now at 19,891. It's up about 1,000 since last week, which is a little bit more than 900 the week before, but it's down a little bit from the week before that. So we're kind of at a stable rate from a county standpoint. We're from a city standpoint, San Jose is now at 13,112. That's up 650 since last week, which is about the same as last week. But from a Sunnyvale standpoint, and I'm not really sure, and I've actually asked the county about this, they list us as having 890 test cases. That's only 2 up from last week, which would be a great thing. Last week we had 888 cases at this time. And we've normally been averaging about 70 new test cases a week. So if we went from, for the last few weeks, 90, 70, 70, and now down to 2, that would be fantastic. I'm hoping that that's the case. I'm wondering whether or not there's, some issue as far as whether or not the reporting was incorrect or something of that nature. But in any case, definitely that's positive. In general, things are staying steady from a county standpoint. We were definitely worried that there might have been an uptick after the July 4th weekend. So hopefully things will, be good, and we won't see any uptick. As far as hospitalizations, we currently have 142 people hospitalized. That's up a little bit from last week, and so that's a increase of about 20 people from last week. So we have seen an uptick in hospitalizations. And then as far as deaths, we've had 295 deaths for since COVID-19 since the outbreak began, and that's up about 30 since last week, and that was a big jump as far as deaths are concerned. And so that was a big worry, and so we'll see what's happening, that whether or not that's not being looked at from a state standpoint anymore. They're looking at number of test cases and number of people positive. And so it doesn't hurt us from that standpoint, but my heart goes out to those families that have been affected and directly affected by the loss of a loved one. So anyway, I continue to do a lot of advocating on your behalf, from a county level, from a federal level. There's still a lot happening. From a county level, we had our county press conference earlier this week, but on Monday, the county pop-up van, came back to Sunnyvale, and so they will continue to continue to do testing on the second and fourth Mondays. So we'll have it again so that was Monday the 14th. We'll have it again on the 28th, and so that's positive from that standpoint. It's good to see the county continuing to do those efforts. And then on September 24th, El Camino Hospital, their El Camino Health will also be at Murphy Park, and you'll be able to also do scheduled appointments, much like the county health has moved to scheduled appointments. And so starting on the 18th, starting today at 5 p.m., you'll be able to set up an appointment for the 22nd. So Tuesday the 22nd. So that's, positive, and that covers anybody who lives or works or goes to school in the county El Camino Health District. So that's the majority of Sunnyvale, most of Mountain View, Los Altos, and Los Altos Hills. So definitely, between El Camino Health and the county, we've been able to do local testing. And from that standpoint, if you need to be tested, you can always go to sccfreetest.org and find out other locations and permanent locations in Mountain View, at the county fairgrounds, and lots of places around the county that you can get tested for free. And then, of course, with the latest order, you should be able to get tested at your healthcare facility without too much effort. And of course, it's starting to be flu season, so there will be free flu shots tomorrow. And so everyone 6 and older should be getting a flu shot, and there'll be a free clinic in Sunnyvale tomorrow. So please reduce your chance of ending up in the hospital. The flu season, it hits us hard every year, and this year will be that much more difficult when you look at the question of is it COVID-19 or is it just the flu? It's going to be a difficult season, to say the least. But Valley Health Center in Sunnyvale, and they're on South Fair Oaks, 660 South Fair Oaks, right near Fair Oaks. Right near Fair Oaks and El Camino. So actually Fair Oaks and Iris, I think, is the cross street there. But they will be doing free flu shots tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. No cost, no appointment needed. It's just drop in. So regardless of your immigration status, if you need a flu shot, that's where you can go. So please consider that tomorrow. Okay, let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. One question I got is when are speeds going to be lowered on El Camino? And of course, it happened last week, about a week and a half ago now, that the 35 mile per hour speed limits went up on El Camino Real, and that was, and I've been advocating with Caltrans for some time now. Every few years it comes up. It's the speed limit in Mountain View is 35. In Santa Clara it's 35 miles per hour. But for whatever reason along the way, the speed limit in Sunnyvale has been 40 miles per hour for years, and El Camino Real is a county road, and so we don't really have any jurisdiction there as far as setting speeds or even controlling traffic lights. And so after the 3 students were hit along El Camino in a crosswalk last year, that's been one of the things that I've been pushing with the assistance of the PTA, the school district, and talking to Caltrans, and they agreed to do a traffic study and evaluated that it does make sense to lower those speeds along that corridor. So they approved that. So they did that traffic study before the shelter in place, luckily, before the shelter in place started, and then got those results back and said, at the end of July that yes, we will be making those changes, had to order those signs, and finally installed them. So the new speed limit along El Camino Real is 35 miles per hour. That to me is a big step forward as we're looking at safe routes to schools, as well as bike and ped safety along all of our routes. And we've talked about previously about the active transportation plan. That's one of the things that makes sense, that whether or not you're a biker, you're a pedestrian, or even in a car, if there's an accident, the speed ultimately kills. The speed is better for any accident that occurs there, and making sure that corridor is as safe as possible is important. Another question that I've got this week is, when is Whole Foods opening? So I reconfirmed it's not happening at the end of October like we thought. It's now the beginning of November, but they are actively working and finishing that interior. You'll see, if you go by there, you'll see them on a daily basis, putting in counters, putting in the shelving. They're actually working on what the takeout food will look like, what the brew pub will be. So it's that Whole Foods is moving forward, which a lot of people have always been asking me about. So I'm glad to see that finally making some step forward. I had this question again: what's happening with the Macy's parking lot? And finally, so the fences have been up around about 2/3 or 3/4 of the Macy's parking lot for about a month and a half now, and that was to deal with mitigation from, there was so back in the 50s and 60s there were laundromats there, and the chemicals that they put down the drain ultimately seeped through their pipes and contaminated the ground soil. And so that soil, those contaminants have been, there's been ongoing efforts to try to pull those bad chemicals out, and so there's water that's basically pumped in and pumped out. And what these efforts have been doing, so they put in new trenches and made those pipes, those straws to pull out the bad chemicals. They made them bigger, a little bit better, and they extended them more around the parking lot. So you start to see those fences come out as they've put the new pipes in. They patch the parking lot. They'll ultimately remark the parking lot, repave it a little bit. So that's starting to finally open up, so people have a little bit easier parking downtown now that that parking lot is open. So let's see, what else do we have? What is Halloween going to look like? So that's a big question. We're still working at this at a county level. It's one of the discussions that I'll be having at tomorrow's weekly county discussion with the county supervisors, county health, and the mayors. They're still deciding, but right now, with social distancing and COVID-19 and a possible flu season, it doesn't look good. We're trying to see if there's some measures that can be put in place to have some semblance of that, but right now that doesn't look positive. But we'll see what happens. Definitely there will be the concept of, I've heard of people and parents trying to do what I'll say is Halloween parades. So that I think will be part of this. That it's just trying to celebrate the day, and I've already have a special mass being created to celebrate Halloween however we can, and trying to have some sense of normalcy, whatever we can in our community. But right now that's not looking that positive. We'll see what happens. Let's see. When are schools opening? So I've been talking to several of the school superintendents and talking at the county level, you know, once we're 2 weeks in the red tier, you know, K through 12th grade schools can now request to be open and can be allowed to be open. Of course, uh, that's one of the things that if we then drop back to purple, you know, schools immediately have to close. So and then after we move back into red, it would be another 2 weeks after moving into red before those schools could reopen. So there's been a lot of discussions right now, as far as I've seen, and far as you know, I've heard from county supervisors and county health, and of course the superintendents. They're not rushing to reopen the schools. They're looking at it. They're evaluating what measures can be put in place. That'll also be a discussion, you know, over the weekend when the county health and county uh, educators talk and in this roundtable. And so I think that'll be important. Right now, I don't see a lot of schools opening up. There's been several private schools. You know, Sunnyvale was the first, has the first private school in the Bay Area to open up and get the appropriate waiver. And even under purple, K through 6 could get approved to open up, but even with an appropriate waiver and showing that they have, you know, appropriate measures in place. And so several private schools have done it. From a public school standpoint, they haven't been doing that yet. And so this is an ongoing discussion on how quickly we can open up, which is critical. What's happening with the census? So as of yesterday, Sunnyvale had 77.8% of its properties, of its homes, actually respond to the census. And that's actually better than we were 10 years ago. So in 2010, and the census is done every 10 years, we were at 74.6% at the end of the day. And so 77.8 is good. Better than some cities in the county. You know, San Jose is at 75%. Multiple cities are above 80%. So if you know of anyone, if you haven't filled out the census, please take the time. It's, you know, 5 minutes of your time, and it's critical for us to get the appropriate services that we need from a city standpoint. All the federal funding that we get is all based upon our population. So having an accurate census count is critical. And, you know, this is regardless of your, you know, of where you're from. It's whether or not you live in the city. It's regardless of your immigration status. You know, all this is confidential. It's important from a Santa Clara County standpoint. It's most important from a Sunnyvale standpoint. It gets us that critical funding that helps fund, you know, the efforts of, you know, Sunnyvale Community Services and them getting need. It's money that goes to us for affordable housing. So we still have, you know, there's plenty of work to do. You know, if you know of anyone, please, or if you haven't done it, please go to my2020census.gov or call 844-330-2020 to get counted. And so, you know, definitely it's an important step. It's, you know, it's important for our city, and it's, you know, it's your ultimately it's your civil responsibility to civic responsibility to make sure that you're helping our city in helping it get the appropriate resources that it needs. Let's see some other questions that I got. Let's see. Alon asks, what about the library? Why is it closed when the county allows 50% capacity indoors? So this has been an ongoing effort, you know, not so all the different libraries across the county are looking at how they open up, and this becomes a question of, do we need, you know, people monitoring how many people are indoors? So we need to monitor, because they're allowed, you know, 50% capacity conceivably. Would we have somebody there that has to monitor every person going in, every person going out, making sure that we're maintaining our 50% capacity. So right now, plaza service is still being provided, but and whether or not we would allow one or two people indoors to go around, this becomes a bigger question. Ultimately, their city staff is looking at what possibilities are there. Hopefully, we can get that open relatively soon. The big thing is we're providing as many services as possible outdoors right now, and we're expanding services as much as possible. Whether or not it's book drop, book pickup. You can do your library card there. You can do a lot of this online also, and so we've definitely beefed up our online services during COVID-19 to try to provide everyone as much as possible from a service standpoint what they need. So we're trying to get our libraries up and running. Let's see. Any other questions? Yeah, so the library we talked about, in kids and classes activities at the community center. So right now we're looking at actually adding a lot more classes. So you'll be hearing about that in the next few weeks. So ultimately, they are going to provide additional classes at the community centers. And so now that we're in the red, that's actually more feasible. And whether or not that's recreation staff, whether or not it's pottery and art, whether or not it's using the gym, we are looking at how to open those up with the appropriate measures in place. And so that's been the biggest issue, is trying to figure out what we can do to make sure that all the appropriate measures are in place is important. And so not just virtual, and we've actually increased a lot of our online learning and classes, and so I think that's been very positive. But we're trying to actually have some of the hands-on operation at the community center. So you should be hearing about that next week or the week after. And then as far as elections, I'm worried about elections and possible delays. So I talked a little bit about this last week, but you will be able to vote, and this was part of our Voters' Choice Act, anywhere in the county. And so 11 days before November 3rd, there will be 22 voting centers in the county. And then 4 days, basically Halloween is the first day, we'll add another 88 to that. So 100 plus different vote centers in the county, and there'll be several in Sunnyvale where you can drop off your ballot, where you can pick up a new ballot if you had a problem, if you hadn't received yours, or if you just needed to register to vote and wanted to vote immediately. That's a possibility with the current system. And then there'll be 90 plus drop boxes around the county also, and that's good. If people are worried about mailing in their ballots, that's important that you'll be able to drop those off, and those will be picked up once or twice a day from the county and then immediately put into their system, as opposed to relying on postmarked ballots and from mailing in your ballot. They need to be postmarked on election day, November 3rd. But from normally it was 3 days, received 3 days after election day. This time will be up to 17 days after election day that they'll continue to receive ballots, and as long as they're postmarked before or on election day, they'll be valid ballots. So that's an important step. But the easiest thing to do is drop it off at your vote center, drop it off at your vote mailbox. Okay, we're after 10 a.m., so let's go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks again for joining me this week. For those of you of the Jewish faith, sundown begins Rosh Hashanah. I was adopted, and we've talked about that, and you might have seen that on the my Facebook page. So I just found out last year that one of my parents was Jewish. So I want to wish everyone of the Jewish faith a Shana Tova, Happy New Year. And so this is, and this is what's great about our community. I've been happy to be invited to so many different events over the 4 years on council, and celebrate with them. So I was happy to already be part of that Jewish community before I actually learned that I was Jewish. So that's actually been good. But happy New Year to those that are celebrating tonight at sundown. And so as far as this week, I continue to be proud of Sunnyvale's response to this pandemic. I know it continues to be difficult and new issues come up every week. Your response can make a difference. Help your neighbors, make and share masks, mow your neighbors' lawns, share baked goods, write positive chalk messages, continue to build community, and help others, especially during these difficult times. I'm proud to see Sunnyvale's response and, residents pulling together to help their neighbors, to help strangers. So if you're out on a walk, wave, say hello, from a safe social distance, of course. People miss the social interaction. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We will get through this together. Thanks for listening. And until next week, stay cool, stay safe, and of course, wear your mask. Until next week, take care. Goodbye.